480 BC. The world did not yet fully understand the borders of empires or the price of freedom, but on the shores of the Aegean, in a narrow mountain pass, events would unfold that would be etched into human history forever. From the east came an army. It was larger than anything the world had ever seen before. At its head stood a man who saw himself not merely as a king, but as the bearer of a divine destiny, the Persian King Xerxes. His aim was simple, yet terrifying: to crush the Greek world, to eliminate resistance forever, and to suffocate the idea of freedom before it could even be born. Facing this colossal power were the Greeks, small, fragmented city-states, often at odds with one another. And before them lay a place that seemed as if it had been chosen by fate itself: Thermopylae, the hot gates. This was not merely a pass. This was where the course of history would change. To understand Thermopylae, one must go back 10 years. In 490 BC, when the Persian Empire first set foot on Greek soil, no one believed they could be stopped. The Persians, the superpower of the age, crossed the Aegean on the orders of King Darius, seeking to punish Athens. The reason was simple. The Athenians had supported the Ionian cities that had rebelled against Persian rule. But on the plain of Marathon, something unexpected happened. The Greek army led by Athens and vastly outnumbered defeated the Persians. This was not merely a military defeat. It was the destruction of the myth of Persian invincibility. For King Darius, this was an unforgivable humiliation. He swore revenge. But fate denied him the opportunity. Before he could act, he died, leaving this task to his son, Xerxes. And Xerxes would not be content with merely continuing where his father had left off. Xerxes did not see himself simply as a king. He was the representative of a divine order. In his eyes, the Greeks were nothing more than rebellious communities, and their destruction was inevitable. With this belief, he prepared for 4 years for the greatest campaign the world had ever seen up to that point. Soldiers were gathered from every corner of the empire. From Mesopotamia, from Egypt, from India, from Bactria. The ancient historian Herodotus writes that this army numbered in the millions. Modern historians believe this figure to be exaggerated, but even more cautious estimates are staggering. Between 70,000 and 300,000 land troops and more than 1,200 warships. But Xerxes did not stop at gathering soldiers. He even challenged nature itself. He ordered the construction of a massive bridge of ships across the Hellespont. When a storm destroyed the bridge, he flew into a rage, and according to legend, had the sea whipped and the engineers executed. Even this story reveals the nature of his absolute understanding of power. When this army began to march, waves of fear spread throughout the Greek world. Greece was not a unified country. It consisted of city-states that fought one another and clashed over interests. But this time they faced an existential threat. Some cities submitted. Especially those in the north surrendered to the Persians, but others were ready to pay the price of freedom. In this moment of crisis, a fragile alliance was formed, the Hellenic League. Leadership of the land forces was given without dispute to Sparta. Because when it came to war, no one doubted Sparta. Sparta was an exception in the ancient Greek world. While Athens concerned itself with democracy, philosophy, and art, Sparta had perfected one thing: war. In Sparta there was no individual, there was the state. At the age of 7, boys were taken from their families and placed into the training system known as the agoge. This system was merciless. Hunger, cold, pain, all were deliberate. The goal was to create unbreakable soldiers. They were taught to steal without being caught. If they were caught, they were punished not for stealing, but for incompetence. Fear was the greatest shame. Cowards were ostracized from society. This social death was more terrifying than physical death itself. King Leonidas and his 300 guards were products of this system. As Xerxes' army marched south, the Spartans faced a sacred dilemma. The Olympic Games and the Carnea Festival were underway. During this time, warfare was forbidden. The solution was harsh but symbolic. Leonidas would march with only 300 elite soldiers. All were men with children, because Leonidas knew this might not be a return journey. He consulted the oracle of Delphi. The prophecy was clear. Either Sparta would fall, or a king descended from Heracles would die. Leonidas had made his decision. Thermopylae was a narrow pass squeezed between mountains and the sea. At the time, some sections were only a few dozen meters wide. Numerical superiority meant nothing there. Leonidas knew this. With approximately 7,000 Greek soldiers, they held the pass. In phalanx formation, with bronze armor and long spears, they formed a living wall. When Xerxes arrived, he could not believe it. Such a small force was daring to challenge him. He demanded their surrender. Leonidas's reply became legendary. Malin Lab, come and take them. When Persian arrows darkened the sky, the Spartans raised their shields. Good, they said. Then we shall fight in the shade. For 2 days the Persians suffered thousands of losses. The Greek line did not break, but then came betrayal. When Leonidas received the news, the situation was clear. The pass would fall. And Leonidas made one of the heaviest decisions in history. He sent most of the Greek army away. He stayed. The 300 Spartans stayed. 700 Thespians volunteered to stay. They knowingly marched toward death. On the final day, they did not retreat. They advanced. Spears broke. Swords shattered. Hands and teeth took over. Leonidas fell. The fighting continued over his body. Thermopylae fell. But the Greek spirit rose. At Salamis the Persian fleet was destroyed. At Plataea the land army was shattered, and freedom was won. Thermopylae was not a victory, but it was a defeat that won history. And it still whispers to us, some defeats are immortal. The Persian Empire was the greatest power the known world had ever seen. Countless soldiers, endless resources, absolute authority, and a king who believed himself the bearer of a divine destiny. The Greek world was the opposite. They lacked numbers and resources, but they possessed something the Persians could never understand, the idea of freedom. The geography of Thermopylae is one of the silent but most important protagonists of this story. That narrow pass, trapped between mountain and sea, nullified the rule of numbers. There, individual courage, discipline, and solidarity became decisive. This is a lesson repeated throughout history. Power is not always in numbers. Sometimes standing in the right place at the right time achieves what armies cannot. The betrayal of Ephialtes sealed the inevitable end of Thermopylae. But this is not a simplistic, single villain narrative. Leonidas knew of the path. He had stationed troops there. Thermopylae was defended not by surprise, but by probabilities. The real issue is not that betrayal lost the battle, but how one responds when betrayal occurs. Thermopylae teaches us this. History is not written only by victors. Sometimes those who knowingly lose change the course of history. That is why Thermopylae is not an ending, but a beginning. And perhaps that is why it still affects us. Because at some point in our lives, we all must stand for something. We know we cannot win. In those moments, we remember those who stood at the hot gates, and we ask ourselves the question, where will I stand?